This is Between the Brackets, a Mediawiki podcast, episode 21, October 13th, 2018. Welcome to Between the Brackets. I'm Yaron Koren, and my guest for this episode is Håkon Wium Lie. Now, I've had people on the show before with varying degrees of fame, but I think Håkon is the first celebrity who's been on the show. Most web pages are comprised of four things: HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and images. The inventor of HTML is quite well known. That's Tim Berners-Lee, the father of the web, although other people were involved quite a bit with HTML. The inventor of JavaScript is somewhat well known, Brendan Eich, now of Mozilla. But as for CSS, which is what sets the fonts, colors, sizes, and so on each page, it was invented by none other than my guest, Håkon Wium Lie, who first proposed the idea back in 1994. Since then, he has had quite an illustrious career, including serving as the CTO of Opera, the people behind the Opera browser. He's done a lot more than that, but this is just a Mediawiki podcast, so we probably can't get to that much of it here. If you want to hear more about Håkon and what he's been up to and his thoughts on the web, there's a great talk he gave at the WeAreDevelopers conference last year in Vienna, where he talked about all these things. It's on YouTube, and I'll put a link to it on the webpage for this episode on the podcast site. Anyway, if someone with Håkon's stature comes on the show, I'm happy to talk to them about anything, but in this case, he's here to talk about a Mediawiki-based wiki called Rettspraksis.no. It's a wiki that holds legal rulings of the Norwegian Supreme Court from 1832 to the present. Rettspraksis means jurisprudence in Norwegian, appropriately enough. The wiki was created not by Håkon, but by a Norwegian law school student named Frederick. I asked Frederick to come on the podcast too, but he declined, which is fine. I have some personal involvement in this wiki as well. I first heard about the wiki from Frederick back in January, before it was released, when he wrote me asking for some technical help, because the wiki uses some of my extensions, most notably cargo, page forms, and data transfer. Since then, I've helped him out occasionally with various technical issues. Originally, the plan was for me or my company WikiWorks to do paid consulting, but because of Frederick's very limited budget as a law school student and the fact that it was providing such a great public resource, I ended up just doing the work pro bono, as they say, for free. Although it wasn't that much work altogether, really just answering questions. So I admit that it's odd that I'm now serving two roles related to this wiki: tech support guy and journalist. But I guess that's just the crazy modern world we live in. The site was first released in May, but that was just the beginning of a legal saga for Rettspraksis.no, which has stretched until the present because of a lawsuit by people who didn't think the information should be freely available. We'll be talking quite a bit about that, and that's where my guest Håkon Wium Lie comes in, because he has served as the public face of the website during the whole legal battle. Anyway, Håkon, it's great to talk to you, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
So, before we get into any of this wiki stuff, I feel like this is a good opportunity to talk about some other things. First, you invented CSS, Cascading style sheets. Did you also come up with a name for it?
Yes, I did. CSS was, those are my three letters, kind of, and they've been an important part of my life. I went to CERN to work with Tim Berners-Lee. He had actually invented HTML and HTTP, the concept of URLs at the time, but I felt there was a part missing. It was a way to set the typography, the fonts, the colors. Those are not what scientists at CERN ask for first, but it's often what, people outside ask for, the people who were used to having Mac computers with fonts and laser writers and such. So my job became sort of to find a gap between those two worlds. The HTML is its structured documents, and then also to add that human presentation level, which CSS is. Yeah.
Were you influenced at all by HyperCard? You mentioned Mac stuff.
I mentioned Mac. Actually, I didn't use Mac so much because Apple were involved in legal, efforts to protect their copyrights and such. So I was not a Mac user, not a HyperCard user, but the concept of hypertext made its way into HTML. I was more actually influenced by FrameMaker which I used on Unix workstations, Sun and Next workstations. FrameMaker was a fantastic page application it taught me a lot about typography, and many of the things that are in CSS were stolen straight from FrameMaker.
That's interesting. Okay, yeah, I asked about HyperCard because it was sort of independently an influence on the web and on wikis, although I guess there was other software like FrameMaker that did similar kind of things. In that conference talk I mentioned before, you said something very interesting. You were, from what I understand, at the MIT Media Lab in the early 90s when you first heard about the new World Wide Web, and basically left MIT right away to go to CERN to work with Tim Berners-Lee and the rest. But you note that the World Wide Web could have been invented at MIT. They had the know-how and the hardware for it. I've never really thought about it before, but HTTP and all the rest could have been invented as early as the late 60s. There was that famous Stanford demo in 1968 where they were using hypertext and networking and a million other things. So someone at MIT or Stanford or so on could have created a protocol for publishing documents with hypertext any time in the next 20 years after that, but nobody did at any of the universities.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it could have happened in all those places that had early access to the internet. Stanford, MIT, big U.S. universities. Actually, Norway also had an early connection because of our seismic listening posts that transferred information over to America when there were nuclear tests and such. So I think a bunch of people could have done this, and people did interesting things. I mean, there's FTP, there's email. We had Gopher come up, but I think Tim was the first who connected the dots to make a very simple language, networked, hyperlinked, textual, with the openness that it has. It could include images, for example. Things have been added. We've had JavaScript. It came sort of from the side a little bit, but it's been possible to integrate it and to create a robust platform that can be used for so many things. Document news, that was kind of an obvious start, and publishing the laws and legal verdicts are in that tradition. But of course, the web today is so much more. It's used for all sorts of things. We can't really imagine a life in our parts of the world where people don't have the internet and have access to the web. And if you ask young people today, about would you like a driver's license or access to the internet, I'm sure most of them would like to keep their internet.
Right. Do you remember some moment early on in the development of the web when you were at CERN, when you realized that this thing was going to be a much bigger deal than anyone had imagined previously?
Yeah, I think part of the problem at CERN was that we had a lot of people wanting to come and visit and talk to us. We had some of the big, PC manufacturers come knock on our doors, trying to understand what's going on and trying to, help us. But it was so much, and it was hard. Sometimes we just had to shut the doors. And so we could sort of feel that this was taking off in a way we couldn't really control. So it was also very important for us to just throw out the specifications we had. They weren't quite finished. Like the first CSS proposal that I published in 1994, it wasn't finished, but it was a starting point for discussions. And we had email lists, we had discussion boards where these ideas were taken forward, and a lot of people were contributing actually. So CSS, needless to say, is not a one man's job. I gave it a name. I published the first proposal, but input has come from many. Bert Boss is the one who's done the most, but I can name 20 other people who've done significant contributions.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's interesting. I didn't know that you guys were already sort of celebrities, like even back in 1993 or earlier. I mean, do you remember? Was there some moment when you could sort of sense that it was penetrating the broader culture, when you saw some mention of the web in some unexpected place, that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, I think when Microsoft decided to implement CSS in Internet Explorer 3, that was a breakthrough. They were competing with Netscape at the time. Netscape was the most used browsers. The Netscape people were very busy. Microsoft had actually, good programmers. They had intelligent program managers, and they came and said, "Yeah, we'll do CSS. It'd be a good thing." And then working with the Microsoft guys, I learned a lot about how commercial software is developed as well. There are shipping, there are timelines. You just had to send things out. And just like the CSS specification, IE3 wasn't finished either. When they sent it out, there was fierce competition in those days. Sure. But it allowed people to see what a web page could look like once you had access to fonts and colors and typography. Once you could, move text, put them over each other. There's all these visual tricks that our human eyes, our perception is geared towards receiving, so that a web page that's styled with CSS, even that first edition, could be stunning compared to a quite boring looking web page. In Netscape, when Netscape first came out, all the backgrounds were gray and
right.
the
Yeah, I
text
remember
was black.
that. Yeah.
They were terribly boring. Of course, images could do a lot, so many people ended up using images to convey text as well.
Right.
If you really needed control over everything, you made a GIF image instead. So we could have ended up with a web full of images, just like fax machines transmit data
Sure.
as images. We could have had a sort of a web of images where we wouldn't have had the search engines. We wouldn't have been able to do intelligent things with the text in the receiving end. So that's where also CSS comes into play. It's a way to save HTML from extinction.
Right.
We empower HTML. We style HTML so that it can look decent, it can look creative, but underneath we want there to be HTML because we want there to be textual material that you can index and search, and it's quite compact to transmit. It has all these benefits.
Sure. Yeah. I remember the days when everyone had their homepage with the colored image bullet points that were blinking or whatever else.
That's right. Exactly.
Brings back the memories. So onto Rettspraksis.no. When I first heard about it in January, I think it was just Frederick involved in the project. Then it was released in May, and then the lawsuit happened in June. How did you get involved, and at what point?
Yeah, I was actually involved in January as well.
Oh, okay.
That's when I was sitting at the National Library of Norway. I'm based in Oslo. Frederick is in Bergen, and he had seen that Lovdata, the foundation that publishes these laws and legal decisions in Norway, that they had deposited a CD-ROM at the National Library. So he contacted me because he knew I was interested in these things. I had actually, in 1994, just about the same time I published the first CSS proposal, I actually published the laws of Norway from the CERN website.
Oh, wow.
This was at a time when we were, looking for content. What kind of content can we put on the web there? Because we had these fantastic languages, but we need some material. And the laws were exempt from copyright. That's the beauty of laws and legal decision. At least in Norway, they're exempt from copyright. So you are allowed to put them publicly available. So we had a sort of a barn racing action to type in and scan in all the laws at the time. because we didn't have electronic access to those documents. But in January of this year, Frederick wanted to go further, not just having the laws available, but also having the legal decisions available. And he knew that there was a CD-ROM and a DVD in the National Library. So he contacted me and say, hey, I've heard about what you did in '94. I'd like to go further. Can you please help me get these legal decisions? They're in the National Library, just 3 blocks down the street from where you live.
Okay.
So I was excited, and I found an old PC. The computer I use these days doesn't have a CD reader anymore, but I have a stack of old ThinkPads lying around. So I brought one to the library. And I borrowed this disk, and I was able to read it and extract all these legal documents, which was great. I could get the archive starting from 1836, I believe, was the first one,
right,
up until the CDs were issued, which was early in the 2000s. So by just reading that disk, we were able to get a lot of the archive, which is necessary if you want to build a functioning site.
Yeah. So that covered the data from I guess the 1800s to 2003 or so, and then you just sent that to Frederick, and he uploaded it to the wiki.
That's right, and then he had some other sources for the newer decisions.
Right.
The Supreme Court themselves, they have published their decisions from 2008.
I see.
And then we had some contributors that came along when we opened the website that also added decisions that they had lying around. So when we opened on the 17th of May, we had an almost complete collection from 1836 until today. And 17th of May is a very special day in Norway. It's our national day. It's a big thing around here. We celebrate it. We celebrate the signing of the Constitution. So it's actually celebrating a legal document, and therefore we thought it was a good thing to celebrate the release of all these legal documents. They're, legal decisions, they're a little different from laws. They're not quite laws, but they tell us how the laws are to be interpreted.
Sure.
So therefore they are important. If you want to be a law-abiding citizen, then you need to have access to both the laws and the legal decisions.
Sure.
So we worked very hard, and I must thank you for your efforts in both creating the software that we're using and also supporting it, because we ran into a few issues, but they were quickly fixed by you, and your efforts have made it possible for us to set up a very decent site based on public information, and that I think is a very good thing, and I think it's something that everyone should celebrate.
Well, that's great. That's great to hear. I seem to recall getting some frantic emails like the day or 2 days beforehand in May saying, we really need to hit this date. It's pretty much a hard deadline. Like,
yes,
but it turned out fine. No, Frederick knows what he's doing. He just needed a little bit of guidance. So actually, before we get into all the legal stuff, I guess since you bring up the software, You've obviously seen, quite a lot of web software since you've helped invent the web about 25 years ago. How do you think Mediawiki and all the extensions and so forth that power Rettspraksis.no measures up as web software? And feel free to be honest about this. I'm curious about your opinion.
I think it's really, really great that we can take a framework and work for a few months and have a very good-looking, well-functioning website, make it available. If we had to start from scratch, that would have been a lot of work. And obviously, Wikipedia it's probably the best project that's ever been conceived of on the web. If the web only consisted of Wikipedia, it would still be worth it. It's such a great thing, and the fact that the software, the Mediawiki and all that is behind the scenes is just a feel-good story. I can't praise it enough. The open source, the openness of thinking here is a wonderful thing. That's one thing. Talking about the Opera browser, that I was the CTO there for many years, and we never could become open source. We were very much open standards, but open source was, always one step too far for our business models. But the fact that we've had all these projects where the source code is open has been very, very important. And without it, we wouldn't have had an internet as we know it.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So moving on from something very positive to the negative stuff. So it was exciting when it was finally released in May, but I guess it was sort of short-lived excitement because something like a month later, there was a lawsuit and the site had to be shut down. What was that lawsuit about?
Well, we thought everyone would celebrate. That wasn't quite the case. We had many happy users, and we had journalists writing about this as well. But then suddenly, 2 weeks later, actually, we had a lawsuit filed against two of the people involved, Frederick and me. There have been others as well. We're kind of glad that that they only went for the senior guys instead of the young students. So that part is okay. But of course, it's a big hit in the head when you're served a suit like that. We weren't contacted in advance. They just filed the suit. So the court actually tried to call me. I was giving a talk about CSS in Croatia, and during my talk, they had tried to call, and when I was done, I saw in the news actually there that they had filed a suit against us, which was wow, ooh, that hurts. The people who sued us are selling access to the court decisions. So they have a business model. We knew about this, of course. It's called Lovdata. It's a foundation set up by the government, but these days they prefer to define themselves as a private organization selling commercial access to these legal documents. And for lawyers, it's okay. You can afford to pay money to get access. For a single person, if you want access, you had to pay around $2,000 per year, which is obviously not something many people will want to do. And there is no other way to get these. You can, in theory, you can go to the court and ask to get a document, but then you had to know the case, you had to know the case number, you had to know the year, and you had to tell them why you're interested in this. So there's no way for normal citizens to search and find these documents that can be used against them. And we thought that's obviously wrong. This is something that needs to be available, and since they're not protected by copyright, we can publish them, no problem. But what the Lovdata people are claiming is that, so they may not be protected by copyright, the normal copyright, but there is a small paragraph called the Database Directive, which is a European thing. If we had published this outside of Europe, it wouldn't have been an issue, I think. But since there is a database directive, they can claim that we put a lot of money into assembling this database.
I see.
And therefore we have a monopoly on that database for 15 years. So they were actually saying they thought we had siphoned their database online, so they sued us and wanted to take the whole thing down. When they understood that we had actually read these discs, they were saying that the 2005 DVD you cannot use. It's not 15 years old. The 2002 CD-ROM, they reluctantly accepted that we could publish, could use that. So we have actually been able to open up the site again. That happened last week. We have been able to free 166 years of court decisions, but we're still in need of 5 years. The years from 2003 until 2008 are in the dark. It means the court has said you may not publish those years. And that's a decision we disagree with.
Yeah.
It's a decision that we have appealed, and we'll see how it goes. It's an ongoing battle.
Yeah. So everything from 2008 on is fine because it's not coming from Lovdata, or
that's right. It comes from the Supreme Court themselves. They started publishing these decisions in 2008. They only publish PDF versions, so it's a little hard. We need to extract the text from the PDFs and guess the metadata and such, but that it's possible to do. And then from 2002 and earlier, we can use it because it has expired. It's the years in between, the dark years that we're fighting to get now.
Yeah, and I guess it's just a matter of time. It's just they only have 5 years left in the best case for them to try to.
Exactly, which is why we thought, it's really, why make the big fuss about it? Why really resist this? It's a foundation, and in the rules when they created this foundation, it's supposed to benefit the public, but they're working very hard for these decisions to not be available to the public. So we're trying to raise this as a policy issue in Norway as well, saying that these things must be available to the citizens. After all, it's the citizens that pay for Supreme Court. It costs 100 million kroner, $12 million a year to run the Supreme Court. And then when the taxpayers pay for it, then you should be able to read what comes out of the courts as well. That seems obvious to me, but it's not obvious to everyone, I guess.
Sure, absolutely. How big a financial hit do you think this website, Rettspraksis.no, represents to them?
Zero.
Oh, really? Okay.
Zero. There's zero hit. Their customers are not private citizens.
Yeah.
I don't know how many private citizens they have as customers. They don't want to tell, but I think it's close to zero. Their customers are lawyers, and for a lawyer, you will continue. You want to have that service that they provide. They add links, metadata. They provide not just Supreme Court rulings, but all sorts of other rulings and documents as well. So I don't think they've lost a single customer on this.
Yeah.
It may have been the other way around, that the attention that this case has been getting them has led to more people buying their service. I don't know. But there's no loss for them. And the simplest solution, without even us being there, they could have made this available to private citizens anyway. It's very common these days, the freemium model where private citizens, you can use, you can have access. But if you're a professional, if you make money on this, then you had to buy your subscription. That would have been a very easy way to solve this whole issue. But that didn't happen. So then two people step in and we form a group and we work in the barn racing way to, make this available. And we thought it was going to be a good thing, and it is a good thing, and we have a lot of support. We just recently opened a site to help us fund the Rettspraksis.no efforts, and we've had a lot of people contributing. So we feel we're in a happy place. We feel we're fighting the right battles. But ideally, I would have spent my time on other things than in court.
Yeah, sure. And I guess the court battle is not over yet. You're appealing the ruling now? Is that right?
That's right. We're appealing the ruling from the lower court. The next level, we'll see when that takes place. We've sent in the appeal. The other side has given their reply. I don't know when that will come up. If that ruling is not something we can live with either, we'll have to appeal, and then the next level is the Supreme Court themselves.
Right.
So it may be that the Supreme Court will actually hear this case about Supreme Court rulings.
Right.
So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and then the ruling will end up on the wiki, and
absolutely, we'll make sure it's published.
Right.
There are some funny twists here, and there's a certain entertainment value as well, which I think is necessary in order to, survive in such battles.
Yeah. Yeah. So, actually, I have a few questions. I'm not sure which one to get to first.
Ask me about the fundraising campaign.
Well, yeah. Okay. Well, right.
Benefits.
So right before we get into that, the very unusual aspect, from what I understand, maybe the most shocking part of the story is that now you have to pay their legal bills, even though you more or less won the case in court. Is that correct?
Yes, that is quite shocking. The other side has asked us to pay their legal bills. It's not the way things should be. I don't think it's fair. They reduced the scope of their case before the last rounds in court. So they reduced their claims from 1836 up until 2002. So we won those 166 years. And because we lost the 5 dark years, the judge is saying we should cover the cost of their lawyers, which is now a very high. It's $40,000. Which 2 volunteers have been forced to pay. It's something which we think is unfair. It's something which it's unfortunately it's not uncommon in Norway that if you do lose a case, you pay the bills for the other side. So as such, it's not something totally extraordinary for them to ask for.
Yeah.
But it still it's still a chilling effect. It makes you not want to start volunteer efforts to make public data available if you are slapped with such costs.
Yeah, absolutely. This whole thing has a real David and Goliath feel to it. So you've set up, as you mentioned, a crowdfunding site to try to get money to pay off the legal bills, and I'll put a link to it on the webpage for this episode. I think it still has a few days to go after this episode airs.
Absolutely. Yes, we set up the site to help fight. I should also say that the $40,000, we have appealed that case. We think that amount is way too high. We don't think we will have to pay it.
I see. Okay.
And if so, the money will be used to develop the site. But we do ask people to pay. We've had a bunch of people contribute. We do offer them also some benefits if they do contribute. Like if they pay 404 kroner, 404 kroner is about $45. Then we invite people to go sailing on the 404, which is the name of my sailboat. So unless the government has seized my boat by the beginning of May, we will have sailing trips. And the good news for us is that a lot of people have signed up for this, many more than the boat can take. So we'll have to do several trips out on the Oslo fjord in May, June, which I look forward to. It's a way of, meeting people, like-minded people, discuss the benefits of open data, maybe do a little bit of debugging on the side there, at the helm of the boat. We think we'll have a splendid time on the waters. We also offer people to help us with 1814 kroner. 1814 is the year of our constitution. It would be like asking for $1776 dollars in the US. And then you can also pay 1 kroner per court decision we published, and we published 40,000 of them. So that's a big amount. We don't have anyone being that generous yet, but we have a good group of people supporting us. And of course, the crowdfunding campaign is a way of meeting those people. So it has worked out well for us.
Yeah, that's great. If anyone is in Norway or in Europe, really, I guess, and want to get onto Håkon's boat. And support open data at the same time. I definitely encourage you to do that. And of course, if you're anywhere in the world, you can help out financially. Yeah, I've never been to Norway. I'd love to go. Love to sail on your boat. That would be fantastic. For people who listen to this episode after that crowdfunding campaign ends, because from what I understand, it has a deadline. What can they do to help the cause after that point?
Well, we might extend the deadline, actually. I think it's just an artificial thing that's been put in there. We will keep that campaign open as long as the case runs. We'd like to have people help us, though, with adding decisions. If they have decisions that they have had legal access to, those could help us. We might also need help with anonymization in the future. There are some legal decisions that have the names of people, that have the birth dates, and we tend to want to remove those before publishing. It's only required to do so in the case when children or very violent actions have taken place. So there are rules about it, but in general we tend to remove more personal data than we need, because the point of this site is not to reveal personal data. The site is there to educate people about how to be a lawful citizen. So we have some scripts to help find birth dates in all sorts of weird formats. And you learn a lot by doing that, by going through all old court decisions when, they used a different language, and you get to see what kind of issues society at that point in time we're struggling with. I've had a great time. I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but I had a great time learning, just reading through these decisions where I've tried to find birth dates.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting that it really is a kind of a historical document, in addition, of course, to being practical.
Absolutely. I mean, the courts are a very important part of our society. Without a government, without having a way of resolving conflicts, I don't think it would have worked so well. And therefore, I'm also surprised when I meet legal people, when I meet lawyers who don't really see the need for this. They think, court decision is something we, the lawyers, deal with.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
The subject, should not deal with that. You can't really understand them, for one, and then maybe you don't have to come and see me and pay me an hourly fee. There's some of that, protecting their own turf, I guess. But most lawyers will see the need, and I think they should be proud of the system they've set up. The fact that we have courts that are able to make decisions in a often timely manner is a very good thing, and they should be proud to publish those decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. So, are there any? You talked about changes that are already being done on the site, and to improve it. Are there any plans to expand the site in the future to encompass more data or that kind of thing? Besides, of course, just adding in the 2003 to 2008 data.
Yeah, we want to add more court decisions as well. We want to, especially in the case where these court decisions have set legal precedents, where they are being referred to by other courts, then they're important to have up there. And making that selection is something we would need help with, finding out what are the decisions that should be available. And then we're also working to improve the search mechanism, the interface. I think we come far in that regard. There may be Frederick is actually the one who set up the site, so he has the total overview of what we need help with.
Right.
But people should not be afraid of getting in touch, even if you don't read Norwegian. I think if you're a Mediawiki guru, then you should get in touch. And again, we're very helpful we're very thankful for the help you have provided, Yaron, in supporting your software. It's been really great to work with you on that.
Well, that's great. For other people who want to help out, how can they get in touch?
Well, you would go to Rettspraksis.no, and I guess we don't have an English text there. That's something we should improve.
Oh, okay.
We will. I'll make sure that there's some English text there to give people an email address to get in touch with us.
Okay, cool. Yeah, if you can do it before the episode airs, then I'll put in a link.
I promise.
Okay,
I promise.
So the whole lawsuit seems to have gotten a lot of publicity in Norway. Have you done a lot of interviews for it?
Yeah, we've been on the radio. We talked to journalists here. Actually, we have the support of the Journalists Association as well as the Editors Association.
Oh, that makes sense.
These people are very concerned about having access to public sources, and when they write about crimes, for example, they want to have the court decisions there to consult them as well. So they've actually added their own legal writing in support of our cause. That's very, very helpful for us. So there's a lot of people who've heard about our case. I think as we progress in the levels of courts, even more people will hear about it. And I think also there should be a realization amongst the politicians maybe that this is something that they should do as part of the government service. I think it's obvious that a government needs to publish the laws of the country. If you expect people to follow and behave, then you need to have those laws available.
Sure.
And I think just right after that is a requirement to publish the important legal decisions to tell us how to interpret those laws. So I hope that this case will be inspiring for the politicians in Norway, but also outside of Norway. I know there's discussions in the EU just as we speak. They've come to us and talked to us and been interested in hearing our experience. It seems to be that not so many public bodies have used this little database directive to stop people from publishing public documents.
Oh, okay.
But there are other cases as well. And, when you think about it, a website is basically a database. So this database directive, which is part of EU law, can be used to stop all sorts of things.
That's
all
true.
sorts of open data sources can suddenly be closed just because they've been on a website, and therefore you cannot use them. So I think we need the long-term fight here is to remove the database directive, or at least modify it so that you cannot use the database directive to stop people from publishing open data.
Yeah. I was thinking about any analogies in the US to this whole thing. There's no real direct analogy, but there's something that's pretty similar, which is scientific journals, which charge exorbitant amounts of money to publish research that in many cases is funded by the government, so you'd think it'd be made available for free. I wonder if this whole process has made you more of an activist, I guess you could say, for open data and open knowledge in general.
Well, it's kind of taken over my life,
Okay.
This lawsuit. So yeah, now I'm almost full-time activist. I do think it's important that technologists are aware of how their technology is being used. And I remember Tim Berners-Lee, I shared office with him at CERN, and when I was publishing The Laws of Norway back in 1994, I did that first without asking him. I used the web servers of CERN because that's what we had available, and I had all these people in Norway scan and type laws, and they emailed them to me, and I put them up on CERN servers in my personal directory. And the problem in that personal directory is that it had a quota at the time. Hard disks were expensive.
Right.
And I remember, Tim coming into the office one afternoon and looking over my shoulder and asking, Håkon, what are you working on? What are you doing? And since I was working on these Norwegian laws and I hadn't told him about this, I was kind of sheepish, saying, well, I'm publishing the laws of Norway on the CERN servers. and his response was, oh, do you need more disk space?
Oh, that's great.
So that was a good answer. He always wanted the web to be used for the common good. And that's something I hope that we can convey to others as well. All the people, there's so many more people involved today, of course, but we should all think about how to make sure that the web builds a better world.
Yeah. So has it sort of forced you to become more of a legal expert when when you're talking to politicians and so forth, that really get into the details of it?
I'm not an expert. I'm not a legal expert. That I can't say. But I think I can speak with some experience on how people are trying to stop you from publishing public data.
Sure.
I mean, the lawmakers, those who wrote the copyright law, they clearly exempted laws and legal decisions. So they had an intention that these documents should be available for all. And when we find that that's not the case because some little organization has a monopoly and they try desperately to hang on to their business model, then there's something wrong. And maybe the politicians need to find a solution, unless we can find a solution through the courts. We're trying the courts system first. We have a basic belief in the court system. That's, after all, why we're publishing the legal decisions. But if not, politicians may need to step in. And what I hope, and that's so good that you're also interested in this, that we can, communicate this in the English language and make people aware of these kinds of legal battles. Because I think Norway is not better or worse, perhaps, than others. These are battles that need to be fought all over the world.
Sure. I think that's a great way to end this interview. Those are all my questions. On that, mostly optimistic note, it was great to talk to you, and good luck with, the battle for open data.
Thank you so much.
This has been Between the Brackets. I want to again thank my guest, the pioneering Håkon Wium Lie, and thank you all for listening. See you next time.